All right. It's going to get a little hot in here. Here we go. But we're going to answer it because this is what's being asked.
Yes.
This mom asks, what is the best age to start talking with my kids about sex? We do our best to protect them from inappropriate things they may see on TV, movies, etc. But my 9-year-old keeps asking about how babies are made, and I'm not sure how much to tell her. Ooh. I love that question because
it's a great question. So should we just say if you have kids in the room listening, they could exit?
Yeah, maybe.
We're not going to say anything, but that you're not going to say.
Yeah.
We're talking about sex.
Right. So I have been through this with both of my girls.
Yes.
And I love this question because it's literally how it happened with both of them, where they just, and especially, I don't know if it's the same with boys. Again, Abby, you can maybe talk on that a little bit better than I can. But with my girls, both of my girls are very girly. They both have very strong motherly instincts. They're both nurturers. They love playing with baby dolls. They love babies. And so I want to say with my oldest, she was probably 7 or 8 when she really started asking. I mean, she was just like, how are babies made? How are babies made? And so for the first couple of, well, I don't even know if it was, she was maybe 7, I think. For the first maybe 1.5, 2 years, I just gave her kind of a vague answer. But by the time she was 9, she just literally, she came to me and she said, Mom, I really want to know. I really want to understand how babies are made. Aww. And what I didn't want was I didn't want to give her too much information where she was going to have to carry something heavy that her emotions and her brain weren't ready to handle.
Right.
And at the same time, I never want my girls to feel like sex is a bad thing or that it's, somehow shameful. I always wanted them to understand it in the context of God's plan for marriage. And so, she literally came eye to eye with me and she's like, Mom, I really want to know. And so I said, okay. I said, I'll tell you. And I actually have a couple of books that I recommend that I will link to in the show notes that I think are really helpful. They are written from a very strong Christian perspective, but read them first before you read them to your kids.
Yes.
Anyway, I just sat down and I just explained it to her, and I was not embarrassed. She was not embarrassed. She was just like, oh, okay. And then because her sister is 5 years younger, somehow it just seemed a little bit more natural to talk with her about it. But let me tell you what has happened as a result of this. I now have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old who are not afraid to talk to me about anything. They literally ask me questions about everything. And there have been many times where one of them will say, Mom, I'm kind of embarrassed to ask you this. I'm like, honey, there's nothing, first of all, there's nothing you can ask me that is going to surprise me.
Right.
Second of all, God created our bodies a certain way, and he created a husband and a wife. And within the confines of marriage, sex is a beautiful, wonderful gift that God has given us. And there is nothing to be ashamed of. It is a wonderful thing. But outside of marriage, that's when it becomes shameful. And we talk about these things just, and the questions almost always come when we're in the car for some reason, usually alone, or going to the grocery store or whatever. And I'll have one kid with me. And so just be honest with your kids. Don't be embarrassed about it. Just explain, this is how God made our bodies. This is how babies are made. Again, I'll link to those books for you because they kind of go in different stages according to your child's age.
Are they these, The Story of Me?
Yes. Yeah.
The Story of Me.
Those are the ones.
Book 1, Before I Was Born. These are what we used to. These are amazing.
I think there's 4 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they give you the ages, which I'll be honest, depending on where your kids are at, it seems to me that homeschool kids, we can wait a little longer. They're not hearing things on the playground.
Right.
But you want to, our view is, well, here's my number 1 advice. Get a rabbit. Get 2 rabbits. Get a boy rabbit and a girl rabbit. And put them in a cage together. That's what happened with us. And then they have babies. And then one night my daughter said, is that how it works with you and Dad too? And we said, yep. And that was the end of it. It was hilarious. So if you're raised around animals, which our family was raised on ranches, that tells it all. And then you just explain how God made marriage. But I think, like Yvette said, we are to be their first line.
Yes.
We want our kids to know. I want to hit my kids before anyone else does.
Yep.
So some people say, oh, it's too early. But to me, you need to be aware of where your kids are, who they're hanging around with. And that's going to tell you when, because the when is always before they hear it from someone else. Always.
Yeah.
Because you want to be the first one to tell them, to make sure that they get truth and accurate information.
Right.
And the second thing is, I think, is if you wait too long, it might become awkward. Where when they're little, God has designed them. I mean, God made us a certain way, and it doesn't become weird until sin enters into it.
Right.
So if we can hit it before that, and then our rule is, like you said, there is nothing you can't ask me. Nothing.
Right.
I don't care how awkward it feels. I don't care how. And this is what my husband always tells them. There's nothing I'm not going to answer. I will always tell you the truthful answer. And it has been awkward at many times. But the point is if they're old enough to ask, we want to tell them. Otherwise, they're going to start to try to figure it out in their own heads.
Right.
And their minds are too little. We just don't want the world or the influences anywhere else for them to start to figure it out. So these books, The Story of Me, that just helps get you started and going there. But it's wonderful. It's a good thing. And we want to catch them before the world and the devil tries to twist what God has made for a beautiful, beautiful thing.
That's right. That's right.
So.
And it is a part of parenting that I love. And it's a part of homeschooling that I love, that we get to be the ones to teach this to our kids. They're not learning it from a classroom. I remember, years ago, we had a exchange student from China. She lived with us for an entire school year. And she was 14 when she came to us. And I remember she said, like, she didn't even understand how, like, the female body worked.
Wow.
She learned it at school. And she said, my mom never, like she said, in our culture, she said, moms don't talk to their kids about this stuff. And she was actually like, you talk to your girls about these types of things? And I was like, yes, of course I do. But it was such a shock to her that I, as their mother, and I'm thinking, well, I should be the one to talk to them about these things. Praise God that I have the opportunity to speak beauty and life into my children in regards to such a sensitive topic.
Right.
So yes, praise God for that. If they're asking questions, again, start kind of soft. Don't push them off to the side and say, that's none of your business. We're not going to answer that.
Right.
Be just cautious of your words. But at the same time, know when it's time. And you'll know. You listen to their cues. You'll know when it's time. So,
for sure. Good question.
Yes, that was a good question. All right, let me see. This next one is, this one we're going to answer pretty quickly. I'd love recommendations on a good homeschool curriculum for my preschooler, age 3. And Abby, I'm going to let you answer this, but before you answer it, I'm going to say we just recorded an episode all about preschool with Leslie Richards from the Homegrown Preschooler. And so she answers this question pretty well, but Abby, I'm going to let you jump on this really quickly.
I hope I don't answer it differently than her.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you, I know you won't, because I just interviewed her, and I know where you stand on this, because you stand where I stand.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think the word we have to get rid of in your question is that I love recommendations on a good homeschool curriculum for my preschooler. So what I'm not going to do is give you recommendations on a good homeschool curriculum for your preschooler, because your 3-year-old is 3, and we need to throw out curriculum, because your 3-year-old doesn't need curriculum. Your 3-year-old needs read to. As much as you can possibly read. Your 3-year-old needs talked to. Play with Play-Doh, play with games, take them on adventures, read to them. I'm going to say that 15 times. There is no evidence, and I'm an early childhood. I have my elementary ed degree, and I got an emphasis in early childhood development. And there is really no evidence that says that if you use a formal academic curriculum in those early years, and I'm even talking kindergarten, there's no evidence that your kids are going to academically be any more quote unquote successful than kids that didn't. But there is unbelievable amounts of evidence that will say that if you read to your child and interact with your child through verbal communication and play games with them, they will be far ahead of their peers. So I'm not going to go too much into it, because there's going to be a whole podcast on it, but I would say, would you just take your 3-year-old and snuggle that 3-year-old on your lap and just do life with them and not worry about the curriculum? That is my greatest advice.
Yep. When
And my guess is the mom that asked this is your first kid at 3, because we all asked that with our first kid.
Yes. And
then we all realized, don't do that.
Right. Yes. I'm trying to remember exactly how he said it, but when Kurt Cameron was on for Homegrown Generation, and someone asked him a question about curriculum, and he said something to the effect of, "The parent is the best curriculum."
I love
for
that.
your child.
Yes.
And it's true. We are their curriculum, and Leslie really does answer it the same way that you do. I mean, she's
good.
literally written a book about preschoolers, and she says
Awesome.
it's through play, it's through exploration,
Yes.
it's through, interacting with your kids. That's how they learn. Do not sit your 3-year-old down at a table and expect him to copy letters and do worksheets.
And
because
here's the thing,
they
if
can't.
you do, not only can they not, but you are going to rob that child of the love of learning. You're going to kill their love of learning before they're ever even actually school age.
Right.
And I've seen it happen time and time again. You get a first grader who hates school, and that's because they've been sat down for the last 3 years trying to do school when they never should have. So just right now, just instill in them a love for learning. Don't kill that with worksheets and curriculum.
Right. And I used to be a preschool teacher, and let me just tell you, we didn't have a set curriculum.
No.
We read to the kids several times a day. We had, our reading hour. Yeah. They played dress up. They played with toys. They played outside. They just explored. They played with, like you said, with Play-Doh. I mean, those were the things that they did. We did not make them sit down. And we would, we had flashcards, and we would sit and say, A says ah, B says buh.
But really
we
not
would do
even
those
at
things.
3 necessarily. That's more like 4
right.
or 5.
Yeah, you're right. That was like 4 or 5.
3, they're not even
3
able to put that stuff together.
Yep. Even 4 and 5, it's not necessary yet. Now, if they're expressing an interest in wanting to learn how to read or wanting to learn their letters and things like that, or colors,
point them out to them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah,
my
it's
husband
not
always
necessary.
says I have my master's in coloring and Play-Doh.
Right. I love it. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're out of time for part 2. Yay. We are going to be back again with part 3 to answer the last couple of questions that we have. Thank you guys again for joining us. We love you, and we will see you back here, I think, tomorrow. Woo-hoo. Okay, see you then. Bye.